Welcome back to another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast presented by the Kings Herald. My name is Brendan Nunez, and today I want to spend a little bit of time talking about a take that I've seen a lot around recently from a handful of media members and a lot of people in the fan base as well, that the Kings have to trade De'Aaron Fox. And it's this strong wording that I can't do. They have to trade their best player. I don't have to is my issue. I can understand the logic, but I think there's also a damn good argument on why the Kings should not trade De'Aaron Fox. Mainly centered around the fact that he's really good at basketball and been surrounded by coaches that are not good at coaching basketball, and more players that are not good at basketball than players that are good at basketball. That's me oversimplifying. Obviously, everybody that makes the league is good at basketball, but when it comes to the NBA level and the impact that his teammates have had, recording this right after the Sacramento Kings lost to the Los Angeles Lakers, not really going to talk about that one all too much. It had that very weird ending and the jump ball call at the end that Alva Gentry was funny enough to say was horse shit after the game. And, it's not the ref's fault that that's the way that the rule is, but the rule needs to be changed and some sort of common sense should come into play at some point. I agree. I don't know how you write that in the rule book to make it defined and easy to enforce. But a weird one. The Kings turned the ball over, I want to say 18 times, and they hardly turned over the Lakers. But De'Aaron Fox had a great game. 30 points, 6 assists. He did have 4 turnovers, but then 3 rebounds there as well. Like I said, 30 points on 12 of 21 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3, and 4 of 4 from the free throw line. And in the game prior against the Miami Heat, he had 24 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 turnovers there as well, and 2 steals on 5 of 12 from the field, 0 of 4 from 3. But then 14 of 15 from the free throw line, including 2 to really seal the game. He scored 7 of the Kings' final 9 points. He was getting switched on to Jimmy Butler late in the fourth quarter and really holding his own. We've seen 2 games of De'Aaron Fox taking over and looking like himself again. Since he's come back from being in health and safety protocol, he had a little bit of a slow start. But, for a guy that so much of his game is surrounded by his athleticism. I think when you're talking a COVID-related absence, or even though he was asymptomatic, as he told us, to have that extended absence and not get the chance to remain in peak game shape, I think it will make players take a little while to kind of return to form. And, it's notable in the 10 games prior to going down in health and safety protocol, De'Aaron Fox had been averaging 23.8 points, 3.9 assists, 4.3 rebounds on 50% from the field, 29.7% from 3, and 77% from the free throw line. His free throw percentage is definitely taken a little bit of a jump this year. He's currently sitting at 75%. And like I said, he had that one game of 14 of 15. That was the most free throws, that he's ever made in a single game in his career. It also tied the most he attempted, but it did set the record for the most that he made in a single game. So, there were some things coming out prior to this breakout game that Fox had against Miami, but I even saw a take after the Miami game that every day that passes, I forget the exact wording. Every day that passes where the Kings haven't traded De'Aaron Fox is a bad thing, pretty much. What? Like, the Kings' issue, and what has been their issue, is they don't have enough talent on their entire roster. There are how many players that should be in a rotation on a team that's looking to seriously compete for getting out of the second round in the playoffs? De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Haliburton, Harrison Barnes, Rashawn Holmes. I don't know who else. Buddy Hield, if he's on the right team. Davion Mitchell, I think, fits as well. And then maybe you can throw a backup big in there as well, because bigs are fairly replaceable. But De'Aaron Fox is the all-star caliber talent. He got a max extension. This is the first of his 5-year maximum extension with the Sacramento Kings, and it was deserved. I think that if the Kings didn't give him that extension, somebody else would have. Like I said, he absolutely deserved it. And he's averaging 20.6 points, 5.2 assists this season on 44.9% from the field, 25.2% from three. He struggled there, but then also 75.6% from the free throw line. And I just want to spend this episode talking about how, like I said, the Kings need talent. And I understand a lot of the argument has to do with maximizing Tyrese Haliburton, but this entire thing I go into about Fox and his circumstances will circle back to Haliburton in what I think a logical way. But De'Aaron Fox came into the league as a 20-year-old on a team that, I mean, I don't want to dive too much into his rookie year, to be honest. He played with a lot of older veterans on that roster. Obviously, he also had just came into the league alongside Frank Mason, Justin Jackson, and Bogdan Bogdanovic. So all of those guys were rookies the same time as him in 27-18. And, the primary other players on that roster, Willie Cauley-Stein, George Hill, Zach Randolph, Garrett Temple, Buddy Hield was already in place. Are some decent names, but obviously George Hill didn't do great during his time in Sacramento. Zach Randolph was entertaining, but that team was not very successful with their 27 total wins. Vince Carter's a great veteran. Didn't work out great, obviously, right? So first year of De'Aaron Fox, a 20-year-old point guard that's going to take time to learn the league. He's relying on his athleticism, like I mentioned before. So it's going to be a slight adjustment period as he gets used to the physicality of the league, the change of pace, and just allows the game to slow down for him. So that season does end with the Sacramento Kings going 27-55, finishing 12th in the Western Conference in Fox's rookie season. The teammates that Fox has had throughout his career are not good, like I said. And this is kind of where you start to see some of the mistakes and the issues with the team not being good is that they haven't tried. The front office, the two separate front offices, haven't made. If I were De'Aaron Fox's shoes, I don't think I could confidently look at the moves that have been made since being drafted to Sacramento and say, man, they've really tried to surround me with better talent or to get more talent on this team, either for a few years down the line or talent that is actually going to help win games right now. A lot of times there's really lateral moves because somebody gets let go for nothing and a different guy gets brought in that fills the same sort of production, or there's, maybe always this fifth starter that doesn't make sense. There's been bad head coaches. So after that first year that we're going to kind of look over his rookie season that, was a lot of veterans and a lot of guys ended up leaving in between the first year that he had in the league and the second year. And in the middle of that second season is when Marvin Bagley was selected second overall. Mistake there. Don't need to get into that further, really. And then in 2018-19 is the closest that the Sacramento Kings have come to the playoffs in an embarrassing amount of time. They ended the season 39-43, ninth place in the Western Conference with a 47.6% win rate. 39 wins, like I said. The last time that the Kings won at least 39 games was the 2005-2006 season. De'Aaron Fox is the leader of this Dave Yeager coached team in 2018-19. De'Aaron Fox's second year in the league that ends up winning 39 games and just barely not ending the postseason drought. Buddy Hield played phenomenally. This might be Buddy Hield's best season. He averaged 20 points, 5 rebounds, 2.5 assists on 45% from the field, and most importantly, 42.7% from 3 on 7.9 3-point attempts a game. But then you have De'Aaron Fox right after that. Marvin Bagley did all right in his rookie season here. Harrison Barnes was traded for Justin Jackson and Zach Randolph halfway through the season, which is probably the best trade that the Kings have made since they acquired De'Aaron Fox in the draft. Bogdan Bogdanovic was really solid on this roster as well. And then the other two are Willie Cauley-Stein and Nemanja Bjelica. This is the best results. This team gave the best results of any team that De'Aaron Fox has been a part of so far. So when I'm listing these guys and talking about, De'Aaron Fox hasn't played with that many good or above average starters, even average start, like he hasn't played with enough top 50 players, because this roster that I'm naming is the most successful one of his career. Buddy Hield, himself, Willie Cauley-Stein, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Nemanja Bjelica, Marvin Bagley are kind of the mainstays of the rotation. Iman Shumpert as well. Harrison Barnes, freaking Harry Giles is a part of this. And the reason that this team worked was that Dave Yeager found an identity for this team that he wanted to go to. They were going to run their ass off. And this is just a result of good coaching. While Yeager had all of his personality question marks and maybe off-court things going on, he optimized the roster that he was given. And he came from the grit and grind Grizzlies, came over to Sacramento, and decided we are going to play fast as hell because that is what this roster is good at. Identified that, stuck with it, and he was right. Like I said, Buddy Hield, maybe the best year of his career, averaging 20 points. The interesting thing that's going to be a theme throughout all this is that De'Aaron Fox, as a part of not having enough talented teammates around him throughout his career, is that he never had another good playmaker or it feels like I'm trying to find a word between what good and great is. But for example, that season, even if you go back to his rookie year, De'Aaron Fox has led the Kings in assists per game every single year of his career. Even his rookie season, as a 20-year-old playing 27 minutes a night. That does not include the portion of this current season that we are going through because of Tyrese Haliburton, who we will get into in a moment. But in his second year, De'Aaron Fox's, that is, the most successful season that he's had, that 39-43 team with Dave Yeager, Fox averaged 7.3 assists a night, while Bogdan Bogdanovic averaged 3.8. Buddy Hield averaged 2.5. Willie Cauley-Stein averaged 2.4. Bogey was a decent playmaker, but Fox was asked to be the engine of an offense. And he was able to pull through in that regard. The team struggled on defense, but I think that when you are going to have one guy be your engine of an offense, that you need to find ideal ways to complement him. The lack of assists from other players is because they lacked playmaking. They lacked other players that could reliably and consistently create for their teammates. There are only a handful of examples every year in the league of teams that do not have multiple players averaging at least 4 assists a game. And I did lay them out here prior to this recording. I'm going to go through them and kind of notice the trends on. There's going to be shitty teams in here that don't really care about winning. So that's why they're not worried about having people that can actually create for others. And then there's going to be the teams that made it work with only one player averaging 4 or more assists per game. And typically, it's because they have elite players. And while I think De'Aaron Fox is good, I think he's all-star caliber, he's not elite. He's not the engine of an offense. Maybe he could be. We don't exactly know, but I'm not expecting a Trae Young, a Luka Doncic, for example, James Harden, things like this. He's not a one-man offense. But if you wanted to treat him that way, there would be more ideal ways to see if that's possible. Just saying, I don't think that is the case. But anytime that these teams were able to make it work with, again, only one player averaging 4 or more assists, it was either due to having an elite player, having really high caliber coaching, or they had a damn good defense. And the reason that comes back to the assists is, again, you have less playmaking and creation for your own team on the offensive end. You put less pressure on that one lone playmaker on the offensive end when you're actually able to get stops on the other side. And I am not with this whole De'Aaron Fox can't play defense, horrible defender, and one of the worst defenders in the league. We just saw him play fine against Jimmy Butler. They said the same shit about Devin Booker. And it's not that I don't understand where the criticism is coming from. I've been frustrated with Fox defensively. But him being checked out on defense or not like uber motivated on the defensive end is anybody that's been here for 2 full seasons actually fully motivated on the defensive end? Davion Mitchell and Tyrese Haliburton, sure, absolutely. But Rashawn Holmes isn't motivated on the defensive end. Harrison Barnes also joins Rashawn Holmes, and maybe not motivated isn't the right way to say it, but looks a little checked out sometimes. And I believe that Fox can be a neutral, slightly negative defender, and that the offensive production he's giving you needs to be what you focus on instead of like the slight negative he is on defense, as are most of these high usage offensive players that contribute at a level that he does. So Fox does so many good things on the offensive end where it's like you're going to nitpick his. It's not nitpicking. I should take that back because, like I said, he has been a bad defender. I completely agree and understand. But maybe try to like actually put good defenders around him one year. Just an idea. And that's going to get me into my point here. I'm just going to go through this. I keep countering some of the arguments I've heard, but I'll end up getting to those throughout this. In 17-18, there were 6 teams that had only one player averaging 4 or more assists. The Atlanta Hawks, who went 24-58, they were the 15th seed in the Eastern Conference. They didn't give shit. There's the Cleveland Cavaliers, who went 50-32. They are the 4th seed that season. If you want to guess why, it's because they have LeBron James. So you have an engine. You have one guy that you just run your offense through every damn time. Then there is the Miami Heat, who that year went 44-38. And they are an interesting outlier of sorts here. Aside from the three that I mentioned of damn good coaching, elite players, or a high caliber defense, Miami is, like I said, kind of the outlier here in this 18-19. Well, they do have a really solid defense. I'm sorry, in 17-18, Fox's rookie season. They do have a damn solid defense. They don't have like a clear number one player. You know, this is the Goran Dragic, Dion Waiters, Hassan Whiteside, Josh Richardson. Dwayne Wade did play 21 games this year. Tyler Johnson, Kelly Olynyk, Bam Adebayo, first season as well. Obviously came out of Kentucky the same year as Fox. Justin Winslow was on this team. So there was a lot of depth. And they do fit the elite coaching category that Sacramento and De'Aaron Fox has never experienced. So while they're only had one playmaker, being Goran Dragic with 4.8 assists, even Dragic was not amazing in that aspect. They played such smart basketball and solid defensively that is where they were able to make up for that. Go 44-38, sixth in the Eastern Conference that year. OKC that season, one of the other six teams that only had one person on the roster average 4 or more assists. They went 48-34. That was fourth in the Western Conference. Pretty simple. They had Russell Westbrook and Paul George. Not really sure what else you want me to say. Carmelo Anthony, Steven Adams, Jeremy Grant is actually on that team as well. They had superstars. I hesitated to use super, but they had multiple all-star caliber players. De'Aaron Fox has never played with another all-star caliber player. If you want to call Buddy Hield's one season. De'Aaron Fox has never performed as well as Russell Westbrook or Paul George, but he's also never had a teammate that I feel comfortable saying has contributed to the same effect as he has until maybe Tyrese Haliburton. So after OKC, there's Portland 49-33. They finished with the third seed. They did end up with the sixth best defense that year. They also have Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum and Jusuf Nurkic, all three of whom were playing extremely well that season. And then they had their defensive wings. This is the team that's really interesting to me for Sacramento to model themselves after. Defensive wings being Mo Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu. Harkless is obviously not the same player, but I think having lengthy defenders on the wing, even if your center is offensive focused, like Nurkic is, that you can make that work. I think that Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum is not a horrible pairing to look at when you're thinking about Tyrese Haliburton and De'Aaron Fox working together on, like, for all the skeptics of they can't play together defensively. I mean, I think that we've seen Portland can. I shouldn't say that we've seen because that's been their issue all these years, but they've done a horrible job at getting surrounding talent. So that's where they were at, finished third in the West that season. Sacramento was the other team to only have one player with 4 or more assists per game, and they finished 27-55 with a 12th seed. Then you go into Fox's sophomore season. This is when, like I mentioned, that Jaeger year of all the pace, Buddy, Bogey, Belly, Bagley, Cauley-Stein. Who am I missing here? Barnes was traded for that season. Of course, Iman Shumpert. And Justin Jackson played for a little while. Yogi Ferrell. Harry Giles was a big deal this season. And still, De'Aaron Fox remained the only player that was capable of creating plays for other people reliably and creating advantages. Like I said, he averaged 7.3 assists per night. Next up was Bogey with 3.8, Buddy with 2.5, and then Willie Cauley-Stein with 2.4. There were 9 teams that season that only had one player averaging 4 or more assists per game, which is the largest number of since Fox has come into the league. Atlanta, 29-53. They were the 12th seed. It was Trey's first year. They did not care. Charlotte, 39-43. They were the 9th seed with Kemba Walker as their main guy. I'm not really going to celebrate the 9th seed. That is, Kemba played all right, but they obviously did not surround him with the right talent. 9th seed is not enough. There's the LA Clippers, 48-34 this season in 18-19. They finished 8th in the Western Conference. This was the team that barely beat out the Sacramento Kings for that final spot in the playoffs. They had a very deep team. Doc Rivers, I don't know how I feel about if he's a great coach, but I think he's highly regarded. And it's one of those where there's no clear star on that Clippers team, but they were really deep. Tobias Harris played at an all-star level in that season. And that's what ended up, that's, probably the season that I think was encouraging to the Philadelphia 76ers that led to him eventually acquiring him. He averaged 20 points a game. Lou Williams averaged 20 points a game. Gallinari averaged just under 20. Montrezl Harrell averaged 16. You had Landry Shamet. You had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Ivica Zubac in his first, not his first, but in an early stage of his career. There's also JaMychal Green, Garrett Temple, Luke Mbamute. Maybe it's a stretch to point out Mbamute, but Patrick Beverly. It is a very deep team that really meshed well together, was well coached, and they were only the 8th seed. But, lack of playmaking, they made it work by having a whole lot of guys that were really good at scoring. Then you have the Memphis Grizzlies, who were 33-49 that season. They finished 12th. Mike Conley is their main guy. Yeah, nothing to celebrate with 12th. The Orlando Magic, 42-40. They were the 7th seed that season with Vucevic as their lone player, averaging upward of 4 assists per game, which is certainly interesting that their big was the one to do that. And actually, I'm sorry, it was not Vucevic that season. It was, as I pull it up here, their lone player averaging upwards of 4 was DJ Augustine. And again, going through all this to show the point that having one playmaker is a difficult situation for a team and a roster to be in. The ways you get away with it are by having that one guy be absolutely elite. You go to him every goddamn possession. Or you have an extremely well-coached team that's going to optimize all the other surrounding talent as well. And the other big factor is how good your defense is. Because the more stops you get, the less pressure it is on that lone self-creator or a creator for others to make that happen every single possession and keep up with the other side. All 3 things Kings have been really bad at: top-end talent, capable coaching, and defense. They've been, horrible. So Orlando made it work with DJ Augustine as their lone guy, averaging upwards of 4, Vucevic as the main piece, because they were 8th on defense, 8th in defensive rating. They had a lot of lengthy players. They really prided themselves on the defensive end, so there wasn't all too much offensive requirement for them to be the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference that year. Then there's Phoenix as one of the other 9 teams here. They went 19-63, dead last in the Western Conference. Portland, again, is a team that is intriguing here in an outlier-ish way. They went 53-29 with Damian Lillard being the only player averaging 4 or more assists per game. That was good for 3rd in the Western Conference. Dame, CJ, and Nurk are all all-star caliber players, right on the cusp. And Dame Lillard is, Fox is probably not Damian Lillard caliber, right? Like, the point that I'm going to eventually, the point that this wraps back around to is that we don't know what Fox looks like around good players or in good circumstances. He's put up these ridiculous numbers despite his circumstances. So could he reach a Dame tier? I doubt it. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. It's not borderline is, but he's never played with a player the caliber of CJ until he's seen Tyrese Haliburton recently, but we got to see that keep up. He's never played with a player the caliber of Jusuf Nurkic. And yeah, the depth on that team, like I said, the wing depth, the coaching of Terry Stotts, who, by the way, probably available this offseason. Yeah, that is how the Trailblazers were able to get away with their lone playmaker. Sacramento was the other team, 39-43. They finished 9th again. As I mentioned, that first Jaeger year, Fox being the primary guy, and it worked so well because they played such a high-paced transition offense. It really simplified the game for everybody else, and it makes it really easy to make plays. So everyone else is just getting a couple assists here and there within the flow of the offense in transition, or doing a lot of catching based on how Fox is setting them up. And that is what worked. There was an identity. There was good coaching. And the defense wasn't atrocious. 17th in the league that year. Then you have the San Antonio Spurs, 48-34. They finished 7th. They had DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. The Kings have, since drafting Fox, not had two players of that caliber. They also were 6th in defense, and have what's probably the best coach in the league, or has a damn good argument of the best coach of all time, even. Greg Popovich, obviously. So then you go into the 1920 season, and circumstances just keep being horrible for De'Aaron Fox. After that year where things are looking really promising, he is 21 years old and just a couple games away from having taken to the Sacramento Kings to the playoffs in over a decade. Feeling pretty good about the coach that is surrounding him. I don't mean to speak for Fox there, but Dave Joerger did just optimize that group. So then you go into the offseason, and it's decided that there's enough off-court complications. Dave Joerger needs to be moved on from. There's the whole Brandon Williams thing and all that. And also, Willie Cauley-Stein is moved on from. Marvin Bagley is moved on from. Marvin Bagley ends up hurt for most of next season, pretty much all of his sophomore season. Bagley's sophomore season, that is. And so while Willie Cauley-Stein, who was part of the one lineup that Sacramento had the season prior with 500 minutes and a plus 1.3 net rating of Fox, Buddy, Shumpert, Belly, and Willie Cauley-Stein, that center that was so crucial to, I know we all had our tough times watching Willie. I absolutely was there. He was frustrating beyond the belief, but he fit the high-paced offense that Joerger had in place extremely well. Him, and as did Marvin Bagley. So both of those guys becoming unavailable for all of next season. Dave Joerger being moved on from, and then Luke Walton is brought in, decides we're going to slow the team down a little bit because they have to learn to be competent in the half court. Changes the identity that the Kings had discovered and was working. To an extent, it was showing growth, and they still had young talent. Then the decision, when Vlade Divac has a significant amount of money to potentially spend in that offseason, just not used the most ideally. Harrison Barnes was traded for the previous offseason, so $60 million is what Vlade is working with. He could have tried for Al Horford, Tobias Harris, Nikola Vucevic, Julius Randle, even Bojan Bogdanovic. All of those guys were restricted free agents. Instead, the Kings gave Harrison Barnes 4 years, $85 million, which is fine. I still think that's viewed as a good contract. Happy with that. Dedmon, 3 years, $40 million. Trevor Ariza, 2 years, $25 million. And Corey Joseph, 3 years, $37 million after Patrick Beverley refused to take pretty much that same contract and instead took lesser money, maybe similar. I believe it was lesser to play with the Clippers. So $60 million in cap space ends up with role players and not even starting caliber role players. Ariza was gone quick, as Dedmon, by the deadline. Corey Joseph stuck around for a while, but it was debatable if he was even a playable, positive backup point guard. So this is where it's like, I will say, I didn't hate that offseason. I thought that dividing up the money, getting a backup point guard, a wing, and a center was the smart move. I really liked Dwayne Dedmon. I was definitely aboard that train. So I understand the logic here, but there becomes a trend. So yeah, they don't get notable talent. They strike out on signings that I think are somewhat understandable. And then they go into this next season with 7 players that played at least 1,000 minutes. Again, this is the first year of Luke Walton. The Kings had just won the most games that they had won since 2008. The coach is traded. The starting center is moved on from. The power forward that you just drafted in the year prior, who is viewed as a project, goes down very early in the season. And it's decided that pace is just not the way that the team wants to go anymore. So now, like I said, 7 players. Richaun Holmes was also a 2-year, $10 million signing during that offseason, which obviously worked out phenomenally. But I think it is frustrating to look at, since Fox has been here, they have not swung for adding significant talent. Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield, Nemanja Bjelica, Bogdanovic, Corey Joseph, De'Aaron Fox, and Richaun Holmes are the 7 players that play 1,000 minutes that season. They were okay on offense. Buddy Hield averaged 19 and 4.6 rebounds, 3.0 assists on 42 from the field, 39 from 3, and 84 from the free throw line. Bogey was pretty solid in this season as well. He eventually was moved into the starting lineup in a fairly dramatic fashion. If you'll remember, there was a lot of Buddy Hield being unhappy about that move, even though it is what ended up working best for the team. But still, the Kings did not add another player that was the same caliber of De'Aaron Fox. Buddy Hield was thought to potentially be this guy. At least that's what it seems, and that's where I'm at in hindsight. I could be remembering slightly wrong, but Buddy Hield averaged, like I said, 19 per game and 39.4% from the field. But if you're gonna look at De'Aaron Fox and tell me that he's the problem on defense when he spent every season of his career alongside Buddy Hield playing heavy minutes, who, I guess it's contradictory of me to say that Buddy Hield is just really one of the worst defenders in the league. But like, Fox was never attempted to be surrounded with good defensive talent. I guess you want to say Dedmon, Ariza, Kojo. That didn't work out well. So yeah, like I said, Bogey played well. I thought that there was a decent momentum for this Sacramento Kings team. They were fairly inconsistent because defensively they did struggle, but they weren't horrible. They were just a little below average kind of in every aspect. 18th in offensive rating, 20th in defensive, inconsistent. And there was a lot of figuring out, like, what the hell is going to be our most ideal lineup? What are we good at if it's not pace anymore, because we decided to go away from that? And like I said, in the year prior, that was the 39-win season with Yeager before he was let go, the most played lineup that Fox was a part of had played 500 minutes. And then in this first year with Luke Walton on the job, the most played lineup gets 179 minutes total compared to 500 in the year prior, which is a damn big difference. And while some of it has to do with the injuries that I mentioned, injury really just being Marvin Bagley, unless I'm forgetting something here. De'Aaron Fox was down for a little while in this season as well. While some of it has to do with injuries, a lot of it has to do with they just listen to the lineup. Fox, Buddy, Harrison Barnes, Bielitsa, and Rashawn Holmes. Bielitsa's solid, right? But you think that a lineup with Buddy Hield and Nemanja Bielitsa is ever going to be competent on the defensive end? You're crazy. And you can't only have one playmaker on the offensive end if you're going to be really poor defensively, because then you better outscore all your opponents. And Fox is not the engine by himself, as I've said before. So in that season, Fox averaged 6.8 assists per game. Corey Joseph, 3.5, is second. Corey Joseph, wow. Bogdan Bogdanovic is third with 3.4. Buddy Hield is next with 3.0. Nemanja Bielitsa and Harrison Barnes are not all too far behind him. But again, it's not good coaching. The team doesn't know what they're good at because they're not good at anything. De'Aaron Fox is asked to be the lone high caliber playmaker for his teammates and make up for a poor defense as the only guy. Not going to happen. It's not an indictment on Fox that he's not one of the 5 players that can be an engine on an NBA offense of that caliber. 1920, that year I'm talking about here, there are only 4 teams with only one player that averaged 4 or more assists, and you're going to see this trend keep up. The only way it works to only have one above average playmaker is if you have Dallas, the 43-32 Dallas Mavericks, who win 7th that year. They have Luka Doncic, who is just one of those 5, elite. Give him the ball every damn time. They also have Rick Carlisle, one of the best coaches in the NBA, that is making a Luka Doncic ran offense first in offensive rating, and at that point was the best offensive rating of all time. Not to mention Kristaps Porzingis, no matter how you feel about his talent level, would be the best teammate that De'Aaron Fox has ever had until the recent stretch of Tyrese Haliburton. So that's how you can make having one playmaker work. There's the New York Knicks as one of the other 4 teams with only one player of 4 or more assists that year. 21-45. They were 12th in the Eastern Conference. They didn't give a shit. Sacramento Kings were 12th in the Western Conference, 31-41. Struggled for the reasons that I mentioned. Fox cannot be the lone guy to make up for a shitty defense and subpar talent levels around him. The Golden State Warriors finished 15th in the West that season with 15-50 record. And Steph Curry was the lone playmaker. So if you want to sit and say, Fox just isn't good enough to take this team to X amount of wins in the playoffs. I'm sorry, Steph Curry was actually the year prior to that. So Draymond was the playmaker in that season that I'm speaking of in 1920. But there are instances of, if you want to look at 2020, 2021, of Steph Curry is obviously phenomenal, 32 points per game in that season. And yet Steph Curry, averaging the most points per game in the entire league, was not enough for subpar surrounding talent. And that includes Draymond Green on his team, by the way. Better teammate, better player than any teammate De'Aaron Fox has had. You need good surrounding pieces. You also need high caliber talents in the first place. Those are the more difficult to acquire. So you probably prioritize those first and work through the surrounding pieces in the meanwhile. But the Kings consistently have only 4 players that are actually starting caliber. And again, it was another year in 1920 where Fox was asked to do everything on offense. Set up every single one of his teammates because nobody else was really able to do it at a high level. And the players that he was surrounded by were solid. But when you're talking about your most played lineup in that season being, like I said, Fox, Buddy, Harrison Barnes, Bielitsa, and Rashawn Holmes for 179 minutes. And then after that, you're going to Fox, Bogey, Harrison Barnes, Bielitsa, and Harry Giles for 142 minutes. The depth on that team fell off a damn cliff. And sadly, you see the same thing in the next year. And it's not like it fell off a cliff because the top end talent was there. It was not. It still probably is not. So then if you want to go to the 2020-21 season, the Kings had an opportunity to they added Tyrese Haliburton in the draft between 1920 and 2020-21. They added Tyrese Haliburton in the draft, which he's been a savior for this organization. Actually, not quite yet. He's been a savior for the viewership of this organization, I guess, but it hasn't obviously resulted in all too many wins from this point. The issue is Tyrese came in, but Bogdanovich was in that second most played lineup. He walks for nothing. Also, Vlade Divac is no longer the general manager. And instead, Monty McNair comes in to take his place. It's another offseason where De'Aaron Fox is losing one of the primary players that had been surrounding him for a couple years now, actually, at this point. Losing one of his primary teammates and also having a major shakeup when it comes to different parts of the organization. The year prior was coaching, and in that offseason, it was management. So going to be some decent changes there. So while Tyrese coming in is a big deal, losing Bogdanovich simultaneously kind of evens it out. It's another situation where it's like, great. I think that Rashawn Holmes has really shown himself and really come into his own. But at the same time, the Kings were deciding that they were no longer going to stick with the high-paced offense to use what they had optimized Willie Cauley-Stein with for Holmes. And, we're just also going to change up our entire coaching staff. So getting Holmes is great, but we're also going to deal with this entire adjustment. Like, there's always an if to the starter level talent even that the Kings add. They don't add talent above starter level, really. And there's always an if to the times and moments that they did add starter level talent around De'Aaron Fox that complicate his circumstances. Again, this is all to prove that De'Aaron Fox has done what he's done on this team and been a borderline all-star despite the horrible circumstances that he's been in the Sacramento Kings organization. He has lacked good coaching, good surrounding talent, either when it comes to depth or top-end talent. He's just had a few mediocre players around him. Mediocre sounds pretty negative, but, I don't mind Rashawn Holmes and Harrison Barnes, and might feel a little differently about Buddy Hield sometimes. But after that, even you move to 2020, 2021. I'll go through these ones a little bit quicker. Like I said, the entire change for this offseason was Vlade out, McNair in, and the same swap with Bogdanovich headed out the door. on a what I believe is 4-year, $47 million deal that I still view as absolutely ludicrous. The Kings were not willing to match that. We've seen reportings from, I believe it was The Athletic and other sources, that Bogdanovic could still fetch a first rounder at the time of this recording on that contract. I thought it was ridiculous to not keep Bogey. If you're trying to win now, I don't understand what the plan is here. Tyrese comes in, but like I said, it about evens it out. And then the offseason signings, Kings didn't have much money, much at all, really. They signed Glenn Robinson and Hassan Whiteside. What the shit? Just kind of happy with Glenn Robinson, I guess. But that's what that offseason looks like. I don't exactly know how they're supposed to go into that next season feeling super optimistic. Like there was some growth and it's like, oh, well, now we have another season of our coach that we swapped because of off-court things and is actually a worse coach than the one we had before. But hey, now we have a year under our belt with him. So, I think we'll have an opportunity to really kind of like deploy his system. And Buddy, Harrison, and Rashawn and Marvin had all played together for a little while. Actually, Marvin hadn't played much in the year prior, I guess. So it was like, okay, I guess this is where we can find some optimism because apparently they really believe in that group. Tyrese Haliburton fell in the draft. Like, that was great. The Kings had the worst defense in the league that year. Coaching was a factor. The lack of depth was a factor. The talent overall is a factor. But De'Aaron Fox is a factor. Tyrese Haliburton is a factor. Hassan Whiteside sure as hell is a factor. But the Kings were winning, going through these couple stretches of where they were winning games. And then this is also the season, talking about last year at this point, where they had 2 9-game losing streaks. And when you're horrible defensively, you're going to be inconsistent because it's just about, is the other team making your missing shots that night? Defense is where you find consistency in the NBA. And that's why the Kings haven't been able to be consistent, because they have not assembled a roster that really is capable of being competent defensively. And I think we've seen that at this point. De'Aaron Fox does a stupid amount on offense. He's by far and away the best player on this team in the 2020-21 season. 25.2 points, 7.2 assists, 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 steals on 47% from the field, 32% from 3, and 71% from the free throw line. So amid all this shit, Fox had a drastic change between his rookie year and his sophomore year, getting so much more responsibility and all the veterans being moved on from. And then from his second year to his third year, year 2, they're playing really well. There's a lot of positive momentum. They have an identity, it seems. Then in between year 2 and 3, momentum gets derailed because Jaeger is out. Willie Cauley-Stein is no longer being brought back, which is an understandable decision. But it's really moving on from Jaeger, and the positive momentum identity is gone with it because Luke Walton does not implement the same extreme high-paced offense. And also, incoming are Dedmon Ariza, Corey Joseph. A lot of big changes between year 2 and 3 for Fox. And then you go from year 3 to 4, where your general manager is no longer around. Now there's a new one in Monty McNair. Bogdanovic, who's probably the third best player on the team, not there anymore. Instead, you're going to get a rookie who has a little bit of a different play style, give you similar production, but it's a rookie, so it's an entire new thing for Fox to learn. And, oh, by the way, you're still going to be the only player on the team who, outside of Haliburton, actually, Haliburton can ease the responsibility a bit, but Fox still has to be the guy on offense here. Haliburton was viewed as a connecting piece, not somebody that you would want initiating the offense all too often until he had recently proved that wrong in a major way. but just so much change for Fox going into last season. And he cannot be expected to shoulder an offense that is good enough to counter the worst defense in the league. And while he is part of the, he deserves part of the blame for what was the worst defense in the league, he's not the one that you change. You don't change your best player. You change the other surrounding guys. What were those teams I was going through before? Luka Doncic, not a good defender. They make it work with good surrounding players and solid coaching. Trae Young, team has a lot of depth, wing defenders around him. Clint Capella, one of the best defending bigs in the league. You could talk about Ja Morant. Ja Morant, I don't think that any of those three guys I just mentioned are better. I could comfortably rank Fox among them. But they have competent coaching and players that are able to make up for their, not make up, but if you're going to ask that sort of offensive responsibility from a player, then you better have surrounding talent that can make life easier for him on the other end and certainly not make it harder for him on offense, but he's never had that. So then you go into that season, like I said, Fox fucking averages 25 and 7. Well, as a 23-year-old, this is last season, by the way. And I don't like, people just forgot about this somehow. And I don't understand how we got to that point. Like I said, as a 23-year-old, averaging 25 and 7, there were very few players in NBA history to have ever done that. And those players, there's 7. De'Aaron Fox is one of 7. Trae Young did it 3 times, averaged 25 and 7 when he was 23 years old or younger. Derrick Rose did it 1 time. Oscar Robinson did it twice. LeBron James has accomplished 25 and 7 at 23 or younger on 2 occasions. Same goes with Luka Doncic. Tiny Archibald has a lone season at 23 years old of at least 25 and 7. And then you have De'Aaron Fox. He deserves to rub shoulders with that level of competition and players alongside him. He played such ridiculously good basketball that season, and it really is a shame that he wasn't honored, wasn't given all-star honors. He was right on the fringe, but stupidly good basketball. That is everything that you could ever ask of De'Aaron Fox, but the surrounding talent was not good enough, and they need another player that can help create for Fox and ease the pressure on De'Aaron Fox on the offensive end. He's asked to do everything. Fox is not a Damian Lillard, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, LeBron James. If you want him to do everything on offense, a la Ja Morant, surround him with players that are going to hit these open shots when he kicks it to them at a decent clip and also play defense on the other end. You need high caliber role players if you're looking to have De'Aaron Fox be your engine. Or you need more top end talent alongside him. And obviously, ideally need some capable, competent coaching in the meanwhile as well. But the Kings check none of those boxes. Despite De'Aaron Fox having just a ridiculously phenomenal season. And part of the success that they were able to find there was, having a consistent lineup that they've weirdly gone away from this season with Fox, Buddy, Barnes, Bagley, and Holmes playing 425 minutes. And then also the lineup of Fox, Haliburton, Buddy, Barnes, and Holmes played 404 minutes. I remember the latter throughout last season being talked about a lot as a very successful lineup for the Kings. And then, there was an offseason of And also that entire season had the COVID bubble, just as if the seasons prior were not complicated and just constantly changing enough for Fox. That year was, even outside of the things within the organization's control, so ridiculous. But even when amid the season, the Kings did end up trading for Terrence Davis. They traded for Maurice Harkless. They traded for Alex Len as well, in the year prior, actually, to that one. And then Fox comes into this season with, again, he didn't come into the season with a weird circumstance, but he met a weird circumstance really quickly. First of all, the defensive issues were not solved. I don't see where there was an effort to solve the defensive issues. It's CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard have shown that if you are good enough on the offensive end as a guard pairing, wing defenders and capable average / above average center as well is going to make up for that, as long as your offensive production is enough, obviously, to make up for any defensive shortcomings, which De'Aaron Fox absolutely falls into that category. Think of the Houston Rockets. I'm not saying Fox is James Harden or Haliburton is Chris Paul, but neither of those guys, I'll take it back. Actually, obviously, Chris Paul is a very solid defender, but surrounding them with wing defenders and a very capable center on the defensive end. The defense is not on Fox. He's a part of it, but it's not like, oh my God, Fox is the problem. We haven't tried. The Kings have not tried to surround De'Aaron Fox with another high-level talent. They lucked into Tyrese Haliburton at pick 12, and apparently Tyrese Haliburton is way better of a player than any of us expected him to be. And they are so lucky that that is happening. But Tyrese Haliburton is the first player to be on Sacramento's roster with De'Aaron Fox and average more than 4 assists per game. More than four per game since De'Aaron Fox came into the league as a 20-year-old. Last season, Haliburton averaged 5.3 assists per game. De'Aaron Fox played solid, like I said. Not solid. Insane. 25-7 as a 23-year-old. And then you come into this season and, like I said, met with change very quickly because there was no issues done to solve the defense of problems that we saw from Sacramento at the end of last season. It was just not what you... There's no real progress. There's no reason to go into the year thinking, oh my God, this team is going to be a lot better. You were banking on Davion Mitchell changing the culture, who is a rookie point guard. Obviously, if you're still looking to draft best player available, that's because you think you don't have enough talent. So figure out how to get more talent on the team. Since Fox came, he's now dealt with 3 head coaches because obviously Luke Walton was let go of early in this season. Another big-ass change for De'Aaron Fox. He goes through a coach change from his rookie year to his second season. He goes from all the vets to being the guy. Year 2 to year 3. Year 2, they made so much progress, 39 wins. Dave Yeager is let go. Now, Luke Walton's going to come in and, oh yeah, that whole identity thing that we had just figured out, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to take this in a new direction. And then you go from year 3 to year 4. We're going to move on from the general manager and Bogdan Bogdanovic, who may have been the second or third best player on that roster. Yeah, he's out of here. There's only so many talented players. Sure, Tyrese Haliburton comes in and fills one of those spots. That's a lateral move at the moment. So another big change for De'Aaron Fox. A lot of surrounding talent that's been changed as well. There's been a lot of drama with Buddy Hield. You've seen Mo Harkless things recently. There's been a lot of drama with Marvin Bagley. Despite all this, Fox led the Kings to their best win percentage since the 07-08 season. And he's now dealing with his first teammate that has averaged more than 4 assists per game. And everyone is quick to say that he can't play with Tyrese Haliburton, that he needs the ball in his hands. Yes, they played together throughout last season. They played a significant amount of games together, they being Fox and Haliburton last season. It's not enough for anyone to know. Fox had played so many games prior. He had played 3 entire seasons prior to that as the far and away best playmaker, passer, creator for his teammates. He was asked to do that every single night. Every single night. He was doubling his... He was getting more than double the amount of assists than the person in second on Sacramento's roster multiple seasons. And then Tyrese Haliburton comes in, who is just this phenomenal passer. There's going to be an adjustment period. And sure, people are not going to be happy that the adjustment period is really taking a minute. And it's not that they're not working together. That's not what is happening. It's that they are figuring out how to optimize one another. Fox has said that he wants everyone to be the best version of themselves. I think Fox helps Haliburton be that, and I think Haliburton helps Fox be that. Fox, like I said, is not a player that should be asked to be the entire engine of an offense. There are nights that he can do it. You've seen him be able to take over. But if he is able to hand off those responsibilities a little bit, then you have multiple playmakers there, and you can focus on the rest of the surrounding talent being a little bit more defensive focused. Point is, De'Aaron Fox has become a ridiculously good basketball player in the NBA in absolute shit circumstances that are constantly changing. And the first time that he gets another player who could equal to his caliber of talent and production in the league, the people want to split him up. The Kings don't have enough talent. Period. Top end talent is where that starts. Depth, yes, sure. But it starts at the top. There are teams that have subpar depth, but the depth pieces are going to come. You're going to be able to fill those out. You also need top end talent. And you don't do you want to the whole argument of Tyrese Haliburton would function better without De'Aaron Fox. He would progress into a better player. Do you want Tyrese Haliburton to be in this whole situation that De'Aaron Fox that I just laid out? The only player on his team that's capable of creating for others? Why would you want somebody to do that? Unless you have a ridiculous belief in Tyrese Haliburton and think the team is going to end up with a decent coach in this offseason, which, if I want to be optimistic for the sake of my own sanity, I guess I can get there too. But I understand the logic behind trading De'Aaron Fox when you're talking about other players that could be of similar talent level that are also just happen to be on the block that season, maybe in need of a change up with that roster, or that player specifically is in need of a change up their self. Jaylen Brown, Ben Simmons, and Domantas Sabonis are the ones that come to mind. Somewhat comparable talent levels to De'Aaron Fox. That I understand. But those aren't the type of players that you have in mind when you're saying the Kings have to trade De'Aaron Fox. I would say the Kings have to give De'Aaron Fox a chance to play alongside good players. Put him in a situation where he's surrounded by good players and a good coach before we decide De'Aaron Fox can't do this, De'Aaron Fox can't do that. And if you move on from Fox for the sake of making Haliburton the guy, you better believe that Haliburton is capable of being the lone initiator, playmaker, creator for his teammates. Yes, he went crazy in those games Fox was out. They also lost all of them but one. A lot of other players were missing a health and safety protocol too. But Haliburton was absolutely gassed at the end of every single game. Like absolutely gassed. From that level, I'm like, man, I don't know if that would be sustainable. That is just me speculating. But yeah, that's kind of where I felt like I was at with that. I mean, asking any player to be the lone initiator and playmaker on a team is just a huge ask. Like I said, the teams that it's worked for, you're talking calibers of Trae Young, Luka Doncic, John Morant did fit into that, but also take into consideration the surrounding talent. Ben Simmons is in that talent as well, but also Joel Embiid, and then you have Tobias Harris and decent coaching there as well. Even if the Kings don't need multiple playmakers, they need multiple players that have the talent level of De'Aaron Fox. And more likely than not, if you say you need to trade De'Aaron Fox, you have to. You are trading a player that is 23 years old and just in the first of his 5-year contract, max contract extension. Seems like horrible timing. He's just getting the best teammate of his career alongside him. There's a chance that he ends up with a good coach at some point in his career. It's more change, but the coach changes and the constant roster changes around him are the real issue, not De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox was one of 7 players in NBA history to average 25 and 7 at 23 years old or younger, despite the shitty, constantly changing circumstances that Sacramento has placed him in. We don't know what he's fully capable of. So for everyone saying we don't know what Haliburton is capable of, we won't unless Fox isn't there, I disagree. I think that you need multiple playmakers on a team. It's very rare that you have one guy that does it by himself every single time. Luka Doncic, they're talking about wanting another playmaker alongside him. We've heard the same thing for Trae Young sporadically. It doesn't, you need more than one. And that's what both of these guys are. And if you need to make a move, which the Kings do, you need to change the shit around Fox. You got him Haliburton. You got him a high caliber player. You got him the best teammate of his career. Maybe lucked into it, but that's what he got, right? Figure out how to complement De'Aaron Fox. They haven't done that. They haven't put great shooting around him. Jaeger did it for a little while. They haven't, if you want him to be the engine of an offense like we've seen, they haven't given him a defense that's capable enough to regularly hold opposing teams to reasonable numbers that Fox can actually lead a charge to match or top that number on a consistent basis. The coaching has been just horrible. Make a move where you're really trying to add to the talent on this roster, to the De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Haliburton talent, because they haven't done that. I'd be agitated if I was De'Aaron Fox. There's nothing that Fox, I would think, can comfortably point at and be like, man, this didn't work great, but they really tried to add a fucking really like borderline all-star guy to this team. Dedmon was never going to be that guy. Kojo was never going to be that guy. Ariza was never going to be that guy. As much as I liked those players at the time and didn't have an issue with those signings, those players aren't that. Harrison Barnes is probably the best talent they've added. And what did they do with it? It's been great to have him. He's played a position of need and filled a very needed hole at the wing position in Sacramento. But he's got this year and one more left on his deal. And keeping him around after that, his value is just going to continue to, I shouldn't say so definitively, more than likely going to continue to decrease. Buddy Hield, trade the other players, add talent to the roster. Don't take away from the damn good talented players for a better fit. Get high level talent on this roster. And yes, like I said, the depth, the defense, coaching, surrounding players are important. But who are you surrounding? Because it should not be Buddy Hield. Tyrese Haliburton is aided by the presence of De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox, for example, guarded by Lou Dort the entire game. Guarded by Avery Bradley the entire game. I know one of those is not quite like the other, but the opposing team's best defender eases the pressure on Tyrese Haliburton. De'Aaron Fox is just now playing with the first player that's ever averaged more than 4 assists per game. Of course, he's going to take time to learn off-ball capabilities, but man, there's a damn good cutter in De'Aaron Fox if there's a passer that can hit him on those. He also hit 40% on his catch-and-shoot threes last year. And the whole defense effort issue when it comes to a guy that's on a bad team and asked to carry so much of the weight on the offensive end, dealt with a lot of coaching changes, shitty organizations. Does it not sound like Devin Booker, Zach LaVine? Like, what did those teams do? They took a swing. The Bulls signed deals this offseason that many people were like, what the hell? DeMar DeRozan? That much money? Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, Vucevic? You're gonna trade all those draft picks for Vucevic? Are you sure? How is the defense gonna work? Or for Phoenix, Chris Paul, Chris Paul is a little bit of an outlier scenario, but they gave up not Devin Booker or Mikal Bridges or DeAndre Ayton. They gave up Kelly Oubre and some picks to get
Chris Paul. The Bulls wisely used their cap space. And these players that weren't leaders or weren't engaged often enough or weren't good enough to lead a terribly managed organization to the playoffs by themselves. Like basketball isn't a team game unless you're a goddamn superstar, is so tiring. And De'Aaron Fox should not be thrown into that. De'Aaron Fox is getting the first player, teammate, that might be able to rub shoulders with how good he is. And I think that Fox deserves to be able to have the opportunity to play alongside another good player, or else how are we going to know what Fox is capable of? And you need to say the same thing for Tyrese Haliburton. If Tyrese Haliburton can't become the best version of himself alongside another all-star, what are we doing here? Haliburton's going to have to play alongside another player that can play make and create for others. Why can't it be De'Aaron Fox? We don't know that it can't be. I cannot get behind the Kings have to trade De'Aaron Fox. The Kings have to get talent. The Kings have to get more talent. They could also use a coach that isn't horrible. This is the first time Fox has played with a player that's averaged more than 4 assists per game. This is the third coach that Fox has seen in his 5 seasons in the NBA. He's about to be on number 4. Tyrese Haliburton's already about to be on his third coach, if you include Alvin Gentry being interim. It's a tough situation, but we don't know that these players can't all work together. If you need a leader, go get one. You don't have to get rid of anybody to get one. Like, that's not how... If you think that Tyrese Haliburton is the leader and not Fox, he needs to be the leader of this team, then he should be the leader. It doesn't have to do with Fox. He can do that with Fox there. People thought Davion Mitchell was going to change the culture. He can do that with Fox there. Chris Paul changed the culture with Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, all there with the help of Monty Williams. You saw DeMar DeRozan, along with the other acquisitions that I mentioned, change the culture in Chicago. It happens. It doesn't. Trading Fox is not the answer. Again, if you're trading, the roster is imbalanced. Yes. But most imbalanced rosters are because, they're top heavy and we're going to figure out how to fit around them. You have 2 players that are even... They have 2 average starters in Harrison Barnes and Rashawn Holmes. They have 2 players that top that, De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Haliburton. Potential, like, fringe all-star levels, probably what I would say now. After that, get more talent. Don't send out your talent. So many trades of guys kind of around Fox's caliber with lots of youth and age left on their contract that were not traded for returns that are going to be as talented of players. More often than not, if you are trading De'Aaron Fox, you are getting the less talented player, because why would a team want to downgrade their talent? Same way that I'm saying the Kings shouldn't want to. So unless you're looking to tank, or a team is maybe not tank, bottom out, get more youthful, Fox doesn't do that for teams really, to an extent, but Sabonis, Brown, Simmons even. I honestly don't hate those for Fox. And there need to be more in either direction for some of those. But that's not what I'm talking about. Like, those are situations where if those players are truly available, it's an outlier where those players need a change of scenery and you're capitalizing on them being available. No way should the Kings be sitting, oh my God, what can we get for De'Aaron Fox? Like, what? You have to do all your research, sure. But like, you have to trade De'Aaron Fox makes no sense to me. You don't. For years, you've had to get De'Aaron Fox capable basketball players around him and a capable coach, and they haven't done that. He's got his best teammate he's ever had in his career right now. And they're 80-some games into playing together, and people want to break them up, and then you're going to go through this entire thing with Tyrese Haliburton where it's like, how do we get another player that's talented enough to pair alongside Tyrese Haliburton? It's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have got rid of the guy that averaged 25 and 7 as a 23-year-old. So, yeah. Add a third. Ideally, add one of those names that I mentioned. Take a risk. Show Fox that you are willing to take a risk. The only way this team gets better is by taking a risk. They're sitting here playing patient. I don't get it. Like I said, the Bulls, the Suns, those were risks. Those were risks that paid off. Take a risk. You sit here and do nothing. Things are going to keep going in the same way. We're going to repeat this entire process with Tyrese Haliburton. Teams need two playmakers. Teams need coaches that aren't absolutely horrific, and teams need to try to put ideal surrounding talent around their players that are actually top tier. Kings haven't done that. They have an opportunity to do so because there's some interesting flexibility coming up now. And like I said, Tyrese Haliburton, easily De'Aaron Fox's best teammate he's ever had in his career. So it is not the time to move on from De'Aaron Fox. There are situations where I understand it. It is so far from necessary. So far from necessary. If you think that Fox is on the decline, last year was his peak at 23 years old, and having just the worst fucking surrounding talent I've ever seen, fine. What he's played at this season, I guess, is like what you expect moving forward. Each year that gets knocked off that 5-year contract just makes him look all that more appealing. It makes the deal all that more, it makes his contract all that more enticing and tradable to other teams. But again, there's no real reason to believe that 24-year-old De'Aaron Fox is done growing when he's yet to have the one time he had a good coach. And was his sophomore season when they were a win away from being 40 wins and led the Sacramento Kings to their best win percentage since 2008. And the second best player on that team was Buddy Hield. So, De'Aaron Fox is a really good basketball player. The Kings don't have very many really good basketball players. They should try to add more really good basketball players instead of trading away their really good basketball player for a different really good basketball player, because you haven't even tried to optimize the one you have now. Why would you try to optimize the one that you are just getting? It doesn't. There's no trading Fox is a necessity. It's really good at basketball. That's all I got. Got a little exciting announcement in this next episode coming up. I totally talked in circles today. I'm really tired. I also am very fed up with the whole Fox situation. I spent forever doing the research and some of the numbers that I ended up laying out, specifically, the 4 assists, 4 or more assists, teams with only one guy averaging that amount. So maybe I got a little excited and kind of spitting those all out, and wasn't the most comprehensible, but I hope my points made sense. I really want the Kings to use their other assets, not named Fox and Haliburton, to add more talent, top-end talent to them. And you do that through draft picks. Just use the draft picks one way or another. Please optimize them. You either trade them, which hasn't happened since Fox has been on the team, trading a first-round pick, or you try to put yourself in the most ideal draft position with those picks that you're holding on to, and they clearly haven't done that either. So make an effort to put a good team around De'Aaron Fox before you decide that it's just time to move on from him and he's the problem. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Kings Pulse Podcast presented by the Kings Herald. Let me know your thoughts on this. Again, I understand scenarios. I understand some arguments for trading De'Aaron Fox in circumstances. I absolutely do not understand feeling like they need to, for the reasons I laid out. So let me know where you guys are at. Like I said, check out the Kings Herald. Take a look at the Patreon to support local independent Kings coverage. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Kings Pulse Podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Big news coming in the next episode. Have a good one.